decision to make today, and it has just come down just moments ago. We've learned Juan Merchan will now delay Donald Trump's sentencing in the hush money case until after the November presidential election. This is important because Alvin Bragg had said he was fine with it. So the big question was, Judge Juan Merchan, would he allow this to be post-election just to make sure that there was no even ability to say this is election interference? Because he does have somewhat of a leeway. He could be, we don't think he would do jail, but, it's not necessarily off the table. So the fact this has happened here, at least there is somewhat of a reprieve on this. And this goes with Chukon also saying yesterday that she will delay some of her proceedings till at least closer to the election. But again, this is Judge Juan Merchan saying the case will be November the 26th. Caroline, without getting into the specifics, this is the way it should happen. I mean, none of this should be bumping up against an election anyway.
Well, let's be very clear. None of this should be happening in the first place. This case was rigged from the beginning. It was brought by a far-left district attorney in Alvin Bragg, who campaigned on the promise of getting Donald Trump, not getting the real violent criminals and rapists in the city of New York who are allowed to run free. I sat in that courtroom for 6-7 weeks with President Trump throughout this case. There was no real evidence proven of any wrongdoing, of any crime. He should have never been convicted in this case. The sentencing should never have to take place. Our legal team is confident that based on the merits of the law, no matter what happens at sentencing, this case will ultimately be overturned and President Trump will be vindicated because he is an innocent man. And Judge Merchan has conflicts of his own, by the way, that we're not even allowed to talk about, and President Trump is not allowed to talk about, because there is still, to this day, an unconstitutional gag order on the leading candidate in this election. The Republican nominee for president of the United States still has a gag order on him in which he cannot talk about this judge's conflict of interest. That gag order should be removed. There are 60 days until the next election, and it's ridiculous that this case ever even happened. It's ridiculous to even have to talk about this sentencing, and there should be no gag order on the Republican nominee for president of the United States.
Yeah, it was a case that was novel, untested, and it was also one that they enlisted the number 3 of the DOJ, Matthew Colangelo, to go back into Bragg's office to bring this case. Everyone knew, Ed, when we were covering it during breaking news, when it was the conviction, that it would be one on appeal for a multitude of legal reasons, that all the legal scholars, what Caroline was just saying, this case shouldn't have even existed, that the FEC that was not allowed to testify, the chairman who said this wasn't a finance election violation, he wasn't even allowed to testify. All of this incredible, and yet here we are. So Judge Juan Merchan, I guess it's a win in some way for Donald Trump today. I guess this is somewhat of pushing things back legally, and another somewhat of a moment here in our history of this historic election.
But I think it's bigger than this one case, right? It's the Democrats through Judge Merchan, who's, let's face it, an anti-Trump liberal judge, waving the white flag that the liberal lawfare has failed. If a year ago I had told you none of these 4, think about it, they had 4 criminal indictments. They thought they had Donald Trump cornered with the lawfare. It has largely backfired on them. And I think it's very clear that the Democrats, senior elders, whoever was talking to Judge Merchan, realized that when you look at the battleground polls in the 7 key states where Donald Trump's either leading or within the margin of error, and we know from 2016 and 2020, his numbers have always been undercounted in these battleground polls. If you're going to be the liberal judge who tries to put him in prison before the election and it backfires and Donald Trump is like, they don't want to be anywhere near that. And they thought this was going to be the election interference that kept him out of office to, quote unquote, save democracy, and it's all blown up in their face.